Hello, everyone. So today I am going to continue speaking about the diet. Is there such a thing as a spiritual diet, and what is the healthy diet? So again, going back to, if you haven't seen the previous video, you can go and check it out on is there such a thing as spiritual diet? But at this point, we have to understand that everything we know about our human civilization has been rewritten, changed. We don't have much evidence of how people originally lived because all we know about our life is living in the confinement. And we have been living like that for the past many thousands of years. So we weren't really free to roam around and to understand what's healthy and unhealthy for us by just exploring it. And all those ancestors who were free and were roaming around without organized politics and religion, these people, these beings were free. They were having still freedom because their intelligence level allowed them not to organize their society or their communities into anything in particular. So the whole organization of humanity into some sort of confinement or systems or communities is already a degraded state of intelligence, because if people were together by like-mindedness, by spiritual level, by deep understanding of who they are without the imposition of their will onto one another, that would be a different level. But a lot of people argue nowadays about diets, about healthy lifestyle, like what is the spiritual style or lifestyle? There's no such a thing. The more natural you go, the simpler you live, the more you are in contact with your higher self. But how can you be in contact with your higher self when your gut is suffering? Where did all these organized political structures, economical structures, religious, spiritual structures led us? They misled us, better to say. They led us to nowhere. We ended up with autoimmune diseases, with parasites. Our own body is eating itself from inside. Why? Because of our supposedly healthy and spiritually correct diets. None of these diets were ever introduced by the people whose name is on the label of these diets or religions or spirituality, because none of these beings actually lived according to these restrictions or these unnatural conditions. Whoever produced modern religions were never a part of any monastery, any ashram, any kind of organization. So this is not natural, and thus is a form of control, a form of unnatural imposed habitat. And because we have this imposed habitat, we cannot be in touch with ourselves. We're told where we can go, where we can't go. We cannot even cross into another country because there are countries, because there are borders. We have to have passports, visas. We have to have all these different restrictions when originally people roamed around freely. So just from that very point, we have to understand how imprisoned we are and how different are we from those cultivated animals or pigs. Now, we think that all our vegetables, all our animals at this point, domesticated so-called animals, are natural sort of produce. Well, to your knowledge, or to those who don't know, a lot of our vegetables that we know of have been genetically modified some 5,000-6,000 years ago, including grains, including your carrots. If you think that the carrot is orange, then think twice. The real carrot was more of a color of a beetroot, or more reddish or transparent. And then all these different modifications occurred around that time. The grains were introduced into our diet, and since then we started going down the hill, accumulating more and more issues with our body. And again, we can say, okay, one thing is the diet that feeds our negative gut flora, that also produces different kind of mental states, emotional states, which basically alters our biochemistry and causes us different kinds of mental emotional issues, because anger, jealousy, envy, all these in general, competitive behavior, it wasn't there embedded in our DNA. That's the result of the corruption of DNA because of the change in diet, more settled lifestyles, more restricted kind of living and confinement, which brought about such a thing, such a phenomenon as conquest. And when you have conquest, you start, whoever conquers that land or wants to control it will want to control beings who live on that land. They will organize them into villages, into settlements, into different towns, and so on and so forth. And so this is already the degraded form of human existence, which doesn't say anything about civilization. We got it all wrong. And so the same happened with our diets, because originally the most important components for human existence were the spiritual beings, the spiritual bodies, which were fed and nurtured through pure air, probably very different air or slightly different air than now. Their brain capacity, their lung capacity were different. There was a different level of radiation on Earth. People lived mostly in tropical areas because the climate hasn't been yet modified and changed, and there were no real weather patterns or very distinct seasonal changes. So when this happened when people started manipulating weather, causing changes on our planet, everything started going down the hill. And so before that, people were nurtured by the quality of air, bathing in rich with minerals, salty water or stream water, waterfalls, etc., receiving the charge. So the way they lived, because they roamed naturally, they had access without any restriction to nature, to its natural beauty reserves that we call them now, waterfalls, all these streams, lakes, etc. And so different these water bodies were recharging their systems, nurturing them from inside out. When they consumed that type of water, which was mineralized, going down the mountain, going down into the ocean, to the river, it would bring minerals. So they were nurtured with the sunlight, with the water, with the air, and whatever else they ate there from time to time. First of all, ancient people didn't eat every day. They ate whenever they got access to something. Let's say if they didn't hunt, didn't get something from hunting or whatever, trapping, they would eat fruit or maybe some form of wild plant, mushroom. And then when they hunted or had some prey caught, maybe they would take a little bit for their sustenance and live for 5 days again without it, or for 7 days or more. So, and again, that would be only to promote their physical body. And I'm talking about 10,000 or so years ago, when the actual physical body was crystallized. But then it was very different genetically, because it wasn't corrupt. What we see as a human being now is a totally corrupt form of human being. It's a degraded form of human being, where we not only crystallized very firmly into this body and lost touch with our light bodies, with the higher realities and higher dimensions of our existence, we continue poisoning and crystallizing ourselves with all these genetically modified vegetables, fruit, and animals who fed domesticated with all these vegetables and fruit. And so then you have a question, probably, what should we eat? Well, whatever you eat, it doesn't really matter. And if you think that a diet really will lead you to enlightenment, or any form of diet, it's an absurdity. It's an absurdity in such a way that we have been all misled. And not that I haven't been there, but I've tried it all. And I've had long enough life and time to experience all of what I could experience, to share what I'm sharing right now. And it doesn't really matter what you think. I'm just sharing. You don't like, switch it off, move on. The point is that most of our foods at this point are polluted and altered by our man-made activities. So we don't have exposure to to actual choices. And if something were to change tomorrow, we would be probably starving because we're so codependent on whatever is available in our supermarkets or whatever is given to us. The problem is that even whatever is available in our markets or supermarkets is mostly processed. It's like 95% of food is not fit for human consumption. A lot of these foods are enhanced or their shelf life is prolonged because of certain pathogens that are injected or with which they are mixed. Then another point is that we also, even when we have natural foods, we overcook them, we overdo them, we mix them, we spice them. Do you think that our ancient ancestors did any of these? Cooked food was, okay, tops probably like making boiling water and boiling something in the water or doing this on the fire. That's it. No one paid so much attention at food and in general, like why food should occupy so much time of yours. Do you think that you now, as you're so preoccupied with your food, with your gym, with your yoga, with your Pilates, with your all this nonsensical lifestyle that drain you continuously, do you think that you have any capacity to really stay in that higher state of consciousness and the frequency which would actually nurture you and make you feel content? How can you even ponder about spirituality, spiritual growth, and enlightenment when your mind is preoccupied with your gut, with your physical state, when you're continuously trying to heal yourself? It's just but an absurdity. It's impossibility. You have to be so content. So your body, your gut, first of all, has to be at rest. Your gut has to be healed in order for you to really be able to absorb the higher form of energy frequency and then transmute it, or so-called cross the ocean of samsara. Most of the people do not know these sciences. They were all captured by different religious thoughts and schools, and you are just like a sheeple, just following whatever you are told to follow without ever question. True awakening is question. Is it really true? Is it really a part of my life, my experience? What is life? Life is this connection with the higher being. How can you say you're awakened when you are a sheeple and you don't question anything? How can you know without being connected to the higher reality? But how can you be connected to the higher reality or have time even for that connection when you're constantly preoccupied with your diets, relationships, your health conditions, and so on and so forth? You're trying to lose weight, you're trying to detoxify yourself. And this is all a part of the journey. So, but don't call it spirituality. Call it a preparational stage. There's no such a thing as spirituality, which includes all the nonsensical human activity. Spirituality is very, very intimate. It's so deep and intimate. It's just your connection within. It's your own intimate relationship with the higher reality, whether you call it God, Brahman, Allah, whoever you want to call it. It is that which you can't put into words, and it doesn't have much relevance in your everyday activity, yet it is the most significant point. So how do you think people created philosophies? Do you think that they were preoccupied with their guts? The real philosophies, I'm not talking about the surrogate philosophies, which are rewritten, the ancient Roman, Greek, it's already a degraded version, or all these medieval writings, they were rewritten. At first, the real philosophy was one's intimate connection with God and understanding the higher knowledge, understanding, knowing things intuitively. You went to the forest, you know intuitively which plant to take and which to leave, because you have that connection. You ask me which book I would recommend for diet or anything. None. You either become your own book, your spiritual being has to be that source of knowledge, or keep on feeding yourself with surrogates. There is no such a thing at this point as a healthy diet. Whatever I explored, whatever I heard, all the doctors, whoever, they're exploring, scratching about the surface. Where is consciousness? Consciousness is everything. When we want to heal ourselves, we have to take two components into account. One is consciousness, another is body. Body is only the fruit. It reflects that which is in consciousness. If you understand that consciousness plays major role in your body, the diet should not preoccupy your thoughts, because the diet is that which is available naturally in the most simple way. Another mistake which most people do, and then they complain, oh, I can't meditate, my body is bloated, I have SIBO, I have IBS, I have all this kind of autoimmune diseases, rashes and stuff like that. Well, watch my video on parasites. Yes, there is such a thing as parasites. And why we are infested by parasites? We are infested by parasites from inside, not from the outside. The outside parasites are much more rare than the internal parasites. And we already have the gut flora from the start, which kind of sprouts out, or you may say starts flourishing only when you create proper conditions for it. And most of our foods are based on sugars. It was our ancestors never were indulging in salads or fruit salads and that amount of smoothies or different kind of supplements, because they didn't have access to. This is all nonsensical. This is an industry of marketing that is brainwashing you under the labels of spirituality and healthy eating. You will never be healthy. You'll die like dogs and will be rotten from inside by worms eating you from inside. There is no healing. The true healing happens when you neutralize pathological and pathogenic ancestral corrupt patterns within consciousness, as well as you return to the simple natural diets without mixing, without supplementing, without being a fruit junkie, a salad junkie, or whatever junkie. When you stop going into something which is processed, when you stop mixing and complicating your life, spirituality is straightforward. It's a simple connection. Look, what is there? What is there to complicate? This is the connection, period. The more you complicate, the more you divide, and the more you disperse, the more you divide, the easier you're conquered. You disperse your energy, you lose your energy. You're talking about this misinterpreted spiritual concepts on renunciation, where you're supposed to go into deprivation, imbalances, this and that. I'm not saying, okay, temporary little fasting, just to correct your gut flora, a little bit of this or a little bit of that, temporarily. Certain medicinal plants could be used only temporarily to correct something. Then you have to return to the natural, organic living, so that you can return to your own essence and cultivate this essence and be free from all this nonsense. Now you're supplementing, doing this, doing that, poisoning your body, because your consciousness is obsessed. You don't understand that our ancestors didn't do any of these. And so if you want to really understand what natural spiritual diet is what your ancestors did, how they lived. But do you have a reference point? And the answer is absolutely not. But if you have enough awakening, if you're truly an awakened human being, you will receive that knowledge through transmission. You will realize that everything's supposed to be so straightforward and simple. No one was ever shoving down their throat any pills. No one was taking hundreds of tablets or different kinds of things for anti-aging. There was no such a thing as aging, as loss of sexual function or libido or any type of these things. This is the result of our rotting diets. Why? Because we support parasitic energy from within. And this parasitic energy gets us into this sort of cycle of samsara. You feed your gut in a certain way, it becomes a portal to negative thoughts, emotions from the corrupt faster of our consciousness, period. You're in a cycle. How can you escape? And you cannot understand it. We can only understand through trial and error and realization. And the realization comes after the awakening, if it does come. but if it's a real awakening, because most of the people are just dreaming. You ingest mushrooms and you have hallucinogenic experience and you consider that a spiritual thing. I don't think your ancestors indulged into that. And if you think that your somas and all whatever written in Vedas or whatever is written in other books, that this is the sign of people taking certain, herbal substances for whatever spiritual reasons, that's a degraded form. Your Vedas are 5,000 years ago written. When the humanity degraded to the point of started recording, they started recording everything because they were degraded, because before that, they didn't need to record. Everything was recorded on the higher frequency level, your so-called Akashic records, where if you had that frequency, you could access any knowledge. It's like a eternal internet. And so you didn't need to pollute yourself with, accumulation of books and dust and all these kind of writings. This is a degraded form. This is just to save at least some remnants for humanity, for the future. But the future humanity took it all wrong and got more corrupt. None of these diets lead anywhere. Muhammad said that pork is not usable. Just look at where Muhammad lived. When you eat, let's say, some kind of hunted food, right? Meat or birds or fish, you dehydrate faster, so you need a lot of supply. Let's say you live in the desert, not good food for the desert. And again, you have to understand that all these diets and restrictions appeared because of the climatic change on Earth. Because before that, most of the time, Earth was not having such harsh conditions or such huge difference as we are experiencing it now. So certain limitations were just relevant because of certain, conditions. You don't want to get dehydrated in the desert, right? So you want to consume something that is more promoting your, body. Again, if you are exposed to the sunlight, you most probably will not be able, you don't need to have such an amount of food so frequently. But again, at this point, we can't even imagine this because we are so addicted. We're addicted to food. The food has become addicted. And now we are enhancing this addiction day by day. We're introducing other different substances. Our ancestors never indulged into any such activities. They would never puff anything, ingest anything that would alter their state of consciousness. Why would they alter their state of consciousness if they were in the highest state of consciousness? It's absurdity again. They started doing this nonsense because they started degrading. They started losing the connection with the higher self, higher being, higher reality and dimensions. They started being incapable of connecting with the subtle realm and controlling it. And so they started looking for the solutions. And the solution was all these different plants with which they would poison themselves temporarily so that they would reconnect with that part of collective reality for whatever information, to get some guidance. And was that guidance really that useful? Where are we now? So if you want to understand how useful all this guidance, all these philosophies and religions and spirituality are, look at where it got us. It got us here into this junky state, living in confinement, totally addicted to whatever substances. Where is your peace? Where is your contentment? Because peace and contentment were never supposed to be a goal. They were supposed to be a foundation. You cannot realize true spirituality without having proper foundation. Spirituality is simply a vibration. You cannot contain that high radiation and vibration. And that is spirituality. That vibration is spirituality and knowledge, because you become an autonomous spiritual being. How can you become an autonomous spiritual being with the spiritual essence totally, complete or wholesome spiritual essence, totally being aware of your spiritual being, if you are a sheeple, if you just have no sense of self and just keep on gliding along the surface? Today you follow one person, tomorrow you follow the other, after tomorrow you discovered something else. Where is your inner self? Why don't you sit and contemplate? Why don't you walk and contemplate? Why don't you stay in nature and contemplate instead of just adopting someone else's ideas? And that's why I'm not giving any clear guidance about it, because you have to realize, you have to take the credit for it. You have to become your own master. Because what's the point of creating another movement, another following, another sheeple? It's against any highly evolved spiritual kind of clusters of awareness. And most of the schools of spiritual thought and all these different philosophies are very degraded forms of knowledge. They are just limited to a particular habitat, a particular group of people, their particular lifestyle. They don't give any wholesome understanding, because the wholesome understanding arises only when you embrace that wholesomeness within yourself. Without that, you're but another, sheep in the herd. So if you want to really understand what spirituality is, immortality is, agelessness is, become that. Become that within yourself by simplifying your life, by disciplining yourself, by becoming coherent in your thought, in your word, in your every action. And coherence doesn't need to be diverse or multifaceted or complicated. Remember, we are not even living in duality, we're living in multiplicity. So at least come back to the simplicity of seeing duality within your own nature, so that you can actually further ascend and come to the point of further realization. Without that, there is nothing. I don't care who you are, what you follow, what you consider as truth. Truth is unspoken. You can't consider truth. It might consider you, but you can't consider it. You either that frequency or nothing. So keep on trying. God bless everyone. Be well, be healthy, and find the way.